My name is Surya Chivukula, and today I will be talking about biodiversity conservation. In today's presentation, I will be covering the following topics: what biodiversity is, some of the effects of the loss of biodiversity, the factors that influence biodiversity, or the factors that are responsible for the loss of biodiversity, and what we can do moving forward. So, in the first slide, what exactly is biodiversity? Biodiversity is defined as the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. The many species of the world are all essential to making our planet function the way it does. The plants, the animals, and the abiotic factors all play a role in keeping our planet going. Biodiversity is the variety of life in the world, and it is what makes the world such a beautiful place. Currently, we as humans are doing a poor job of protecting the species of the world. As a result, biodiversity is on the decline, and it will take a lot to once again restore it, because many factors have had an effect on the biodiversity. So let's take a look at some of the endangered species of the world. The giant panda, which only 1,864 remain, the tiger, which only 3,200 remain, the blue whale, which 10,000 remain, and the snow leopard, which 3,500 remain. These are only some of the species that are endangered in the world, as there are thousands of species that are actually endangered as a result of the loss of biodiversity. So the reason I picked these organisms is because they actually have a very important role in the ecosystem that they live in. For example, the giant panda helps disperse seeds and helps vegetation to grow. The tiger, which is the top carnivore in the ecosystem, feeds on herbivores, which maintains the balance between plants and animals. The way it does this is by feeding on herbivores. It controls the herbivores' consumption of plants. If the tiger were to diminish or become extinct, then the herbivores would be able to consume the plants at a much higher rate. And as a result, many plant species would then go extinct. So by having the tiger be this controller of the ecosystem, it plays a very important role in controlling the interactions between plants and animals. The blue whale of the aquatic ecosystem helps regulate flow of food. It consumes up to 40 million krill per day, and this really stabilizes the ecosystem. Another fun fact about the blue whale is that its poop actually helps offset carbon in the atmosphere. The snow leopard is also a top predator of its ecosystem and is a symbol of health of its high altitude habitat. Its habitat is actually very important to even us as humans because it provides many essential resources such as medicine and food. So moving on, let's take a look at some other effects of the loss of biodiversity. One point to note is that there are many more consequences to the loss of biodiversity than people realize. One such consequence is the decreased interaction between humans and the external environment. Another effect is the loss of habitat for organisms of various ecosystems. Another effect is the extinction of species that are important for the world. The niches of the organisms change when the biodiversity is lost, and this in turn has an effect on the entire ecosystem. These are only a few of the effects, and biodiversity actually has very far-reaching effects in the ecosystem and is really changing the world. So, focusing in on one ecosystem, the marine ecosystem. The marine ecosystem has been one of the most important ecosystems, especially to humans. We receive many natural resources from this ecosystem, and we are not caring for it enough. Take a look at this fact. 60% of the marine ecosystems of the world are being degraded or being used unsustainably. This is very astonishing, considering that we rely on the marine ecosystem for so many of our resources. It should only seem natural that we should care for it and make sure that it is protected. However, we're doing the complete opposite and are ignoring its uses to us. Specifically, coral reefs have especially been deteriorating, and the biodiversity is being lost at an increasing rate. The next focus will be on the forest ecosystem. The forest ecosystem is also very important to us, and at least 1.6 billion people rely on the forest for some part of their life. Forest goods and services also serve billions of people every day, from providing clean air to also providing food and water. The loss of forests and trees goes hand in hand with species loss and the loss of genetic diversity within species. The primary forests continue to lose genetic diversity at a rate of 0.37% a year, a number that has increased in recent years. Now, this may seem like a very small percentage, but over years this accumulates to a very large amount, and most of the forests are losing their trees. Look at the pictures here. On the left, we see a fully flourished ecosystem with all of its plants and trees intact. On the right, we see a forest ecosystem that has deteriorated, and after deforestation and the loss of its species, large areas of land are wiped to nothing. Another effect is climate change. This may not seem like something that has an effect on biodiversity, but it actually does. It is a very big factor to the loss of biodiversity. With increasing temperatures, many animals are being driven from their habitats. Certain habitats have certain temperatures and climates that are needed to sustain its organisms, and when the temperatures increase, these conditions change, and animals can no longer survive comfortably in their own habitats. Carbon levels have been at record high, more than they have been for centuries. The planet's average temperature has risen by 2.0 degrees Fahrenheit. Global sea levels have risen 8 inches in the last century, and the acidity of the ocean is increasing. If you think about it, all these different conditions affect organisms in some way. Now, human impact. This is perhaps the greatest impact on the planet and the imbalance of biodiversity. Humans are the ones that most people would say are responsible for the loss of biodiversity. We are the ones that produce the waste, and we're the ones that are harming the animals and their habitats for our own personal use. Littering and leaving waste near bodies of water severely harms the species living in the aquatic environment. When we leave behind waste such as plastic and things like that, this often finds its way into the oceans and can take the lives of many animals. It also pollutes their habitats and drives them away from their homes. In the forest ecosystem, deforestation also destroys forests and reduces large areas to nothing. Hunting for pleasure should definitely be limited or even banned because regular hunting ruins the relationship between plants and animals. If an animal realizes that we are hunting in certain areas more often, it will begin to avoid that area. As a result of this, some plants that rely on animals for their needs will then start to become extinct. Some plants require the animals to disperse their seeds and also for nutrients. So as a result of hunting, the animals leave the ecosystem and the plants no longer get what they need, thus affecting both plants and animals and their chances for survival. People also fish in very large quantities, and in certain areas of the ocean, this shouldn't be allowed because it disrupts the biodiversity of many important fish species. Fish species are also going extinct or are becoming endangered as a result of this large fishing quantities. So we should really put a cap on this because if this goes on uncontrolled, then it will have a very great impact. So what should we do? Putting caps on hunting zones, especially near areas that contain endangered species, can definitely be a start. By doing this, we will ensure that animals have a safe home and will not be killed off for our sheer pleasure. Seasonal closures and limits on fishery products will help conserve the biodiversity of the aquatic ecosystem. Some things we can do at home are using renewable energy. This reduces the impact that energy waste has on the climate, and thus it also helps reduce climate change and global warming. Another thing that we can do that's easy is carpooling to work or taking public transportation. Thus, pollution from automobiles is limited. Banning or limiting the use of coal would also be very helpful because, as we learned in our recent assignments, the pollution from coal is ruining the environment. Another thing we can do is avoiding the burning of fossil fuels, which also takes a very big burden on the environment. So, in conclusion, the situation of biodiversity may seem very poor right now. And it is. However, it is important to understand that it is not out of reach. Biodiversity is decreasing, but it is not gone. Humans have the greatest impact on the environment, so it is our responsibility to protect it. Communication and transparency is essential during these times, and the conservation of biodiversity should be a priority. Everybody must do their share, and it will be a long process, but it is one that is definitely worth. Conserving the biodiversity of our world should be a priority for us because biodiversity is the variety of life, and it is a big part of what makes this planet so beautiful. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope you learned something about biodiversity that you didn't know before. Thank you for listening.